Hey, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us all for this webinar today. Today, we're going to be discussing some of the new features and enhancements that were added to the 12.2 release back in November for Hexagon EAM. This isn't going to be completely all-encompassing, but this will cover a good amount of things that we thought would be beneficial to show off to the users. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started now. The first and most exciting and impactful update, in my opinion, for the 12.2 release is the new chatbot, Alix. I'm only going to glance over this because Hexagon has done a great job of showing this in some of their webinars and presentations, but I will say that it's a very impressive assistant, and I encourage anyone who has access to try it. What I will say about it is that privacy and security are Hexagon's top priority for Alix. Alix does not connect to the internet, and it will not use any of your data for training purposes to ensure this. Alix is only available for cloud customers, and then to enable Alix for the environment, there's a new install parameter that was added, this AI chat OP install parameter. And when you turn that to yes, it'll enable Alix in the environment, and you can access it by clicking the button for it in the top right corner. The permission for this is just based on an install parameter, and that will enable it for the entire environment. So it's not a user or user group specific access. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and log into EAM now, and we're going to show the first enhancement for today, and that is updates to the Overview 360 screens. These new enhancements that they've added for the Overview 360 screens, they apply to both the Organization Overview 360 as well as the Equipment Overview 360. So in this environment here, I've replaced my user's first screen with the Organization Overview 360 screen. So to show off the new widgets that Hexagon has added, I'm going to go into Edit mode and add a new widget. So in 12.2, two new widget types have been added, Inbox group and KPI groups. These new widgets allow us to replicate our Start Center Inbox and KPI sections on the Overview 360 screen. The benefit of this is to show our normal Inbox and KPI listings alongside other helpful widgets on the Overview 360 screens. Like in this case, we have the equipment summary. There's plenty of helpful charts and graphs you could have displayed as well, or other lists. So we're in edit mode, and I've gone to add a new widget. To start us off, I'm going to create the new inbox group widget type. So I'll select that and hit submit. And so now we have our new inbox group widget. Now we can customize the inboxes displayed here. There are two options here. So first, I'm going to open up our options menu in the right corner, and I'm going to hit edit. And first of all, I'm going to give it a widget title, and I'll call this inboxes. Okay, so this is our inbox widget group. So we have two ways to customize this. The first is I'm going to hit edit and then click this show start center inbox checkbox. So what this does is it basically copies over the user's start center inbox listing and puts it here on the inbox group widget. So I'm going to check this and hit submit. And we can also customize the height of our widget here if we like. So I'm going to hit close. And if I change the folder to operations, which is what I have my start center inboxes on, it will display them here. So this is basically a replica of what's on your start center. And so if you add or remove inboxes to your start center, those changes will take effect here and vice versa. So we can also edit the listing directly on our widget. But if we make changes here, then it will also apply those changes to our start center. So the first way is that we can check this show start center inbox checkbox, and that'll replicate our start center. Or if we leave this unchecked, we can also hit personalize inbox. Okay, so I'm going to save my changes here. And so now we have none. So if we don't want to replicate our start center and just want to make a new list of inboxes instead, we can hit this personalized inbox, and then it essentially shows the personalized inbox screen that we have on the Start Center. So it works the same. We're going to enter a sequence number, select an inbox code, select what folder we want it in, and if it auto refreshes or not, and then submit that. So now I hit submit. And the inbox that I added is there. So the KPI inbox, or sorry, the KPI group functions the same way. So I'm going to add a KPI widget. So I'll go to add widget and I'll select KPI group as the type and hit submit. And then I'm going to drag this over. So the other nice thing about the Overview 360 screen is you can rearrange your widgets however you like. Okay, so I'm going to hit edit. And this is our KPI group, so I'll call this KPIs. And again, we have the two options, right? We can either hit show Start Center KPIs, which will mimic our actual Start Center. And this also has the resize functionality that you have on your Start Center as well. Or we can uncheck the show Start Center KPIs and add other KPIs that we'd like to. All right. And so you can also add colors to your widgets with this personalize option. And you can refresh them here as well. All right, so the next change we're going to talk about is closing codes. They've added some enhanced functionality for closing codes. So I'm going to go to the closing code screen. And the first change that they've added in relation to closing codes is they've added this new checkbox on the record view of the closing code screen, and that is hide if class specific. So what this does is if this checkbox is checked and you're entering a closing code for a work order or equipment, if that work order has, or sorry, if that equipment has a class and there are other class specific closing codes on the lookup, then if we have this checkbox checked, this will not show up because this prevents this closing code from showing up if there are class specific closing codes that are applicable to choose from. So we're going to show an example of this. All right, so right now we have 3 problem codes. Okay, so currently none of these are set up with the hide if class specific checkbox. All right, so I'm going to open up a work order. So this piece of equipment on the work order does have a class. The class is engine. So if I go to the problem code lookup on this work order, because none of these 3 have the hide if class specific checkbox checked, they should all show up. So if I click it, yep. So we have the group functionality set up, which is why the lookup looks like this. P2 and P5 are showing up on our closing code list. So now if I go and check this P2 hide if class specific checkbox, what this is going to do is because there are other closing codes there that are class specific, the leak problem code P5, there is a class specific record for the engine. So because I have this one on the lookup, if I go and check this hide if class specific checkbox, P2 will no longer show up because there is a class specific alternative. So if I go back to my work order screen and hit reset, now if I open the menus, P2 is no longer available. That's because we have our checkbox checked and there are class specific alternatives. The next closing code enhanced functionality is on the classes tab, they have also added support for categories. So we can take it a step further. It used to just be specific to classes. Now we can further specify a category as well. And they've also added this equipment checkbox so we can specify specific equipment. And the nice thing about the equipment lookup is that it is multi-select. So we can select multiple pieces of equipment at once, and we can specify those to specifically be associated with this closing code. The last piece of closing code enhanced functionality they've added in 12.2 is the group functionality. So before 12.2, there was a group field on the record view. They have since removed that from the record view, and they've created a new groups tab. So now instead of just having to associate one group with the closing code, you can associate it to as many groups as you need. If you did have a group associated with your closing code on the record view prior to 12.2, when the update happened, it would have automatically created a record on the group tab for you. That way you don't lose any of your data. And so in this example, problem code 5 is associated with both the electrical and the mechanical groups. So if I go to my work order screen and select the problem code, I can find the same closing code under both the electrical and the mechanical group because it's associated with both groups. So the next thing we're going to talk about is some enhanced checklist functionality. So I'm going to go to the checklist tab of our work order. All right, so the first functionality enhancement is around checklist documents. So they've added a new action button. So if you select a checklist item and then select actions, you can click upload multiple documents. This allows you to upload multiple documents at once to the checklist item. And then another nice enhancement that they've added here is if you double click on a checklist item, it'll automatically pull up the documents pop-up for that item. And this pop-up supports drag and drop functionality. So I'm selecting 2 pictures on the other monitor that I'm using. And if I drag and drop them over here, it'll automatically upload them for me. So I don't even need to use that upload multiple documents button. All I need to do is just double click on a checklist item to bring up that checklist items document list, and then I can drag and drop. I don't even need to manually upload anything. And if you double click on the document list here, it'll open the document for you. So you don't even need to click view document. Okay, so the second enhancement related to checklist functionality is they've added a new organization option, which relates to dynamic checklist items. So what this organization option does is it allows you to automatically save a checklist item that is going to trigger a follow-up dynamic checklist item that has a triggering condition based on the first one. So what this means is that right now I have this number 1 and number 2 checklist items. They both have follow-up dynamic checklist items, which will trigger if I respond yes to either one of these. Right now, if I click yes, and then I click away and focus on a different one, it does not automatically save it. For that follow-up dynamic checklist item to trigger and show, I need to actually fill it in, and then I need to hit submit. So when I hit submit, I get this new item 3, which is a dynamic checklist item resulting from the triggering condition of me clicking yes on number 1. Now I'm going to go to my organization screen and enable that organization option. So this is the organization option, check last, however you pronounce that. What it's saying is that if you have it enabled and you enter a checklist response that would trigger a dynamic follow-up, then if you shift your focus to a different checklist item, it'll automatically save it. So I'm going to change this to yes. And now if I go back to my work order and I'm going to refresh the screen just to make sure it applies. So when I filled out this first one, I had to click yes and then submit it in order to get the dynamic follow-up to appear. So now that I have the organization option enabled, if I click yes on number 2, which also has a dynamic follow-up, so if I click yes and then click away from it, it's going to automatically save it and trigger that dynamic checklist item. So this only applies to checklist items that have a triggering condition for another dynamic item. So number 5 does not have a dynamic trigger associated with it. So if I click on this one and then click to a different one, it does not save it. So this only works for checklist items that would trigger another dynamic checklist item based on their response. So our next enhancement that we're going to talk about is the new document repository request screen. So these next 2 enhancements relate to document security. So I'm going to go and open up my document repository request. This will probably need to be added via the user group menus tab to gain access to it. Document repository request screen. It essentially allows us to have an approval process for either creating or updating documents. So when we come to the screen to fill out a request, and actually first we need to select our organization. And so this screen, it shares multi-org security with the document entity. So if multi-org security is enabled for documents, then this screen will also have multi-org security. And the organization that you select for the request needs to match the document in cases where you're updating an existing document. So I'm going to leave the request in the default organization for now. I will say, I'll make a request to upload a new one at first. So we have 2 types, new document or update existing. Because we want to update we want to upload a new document. We're going to leave it as new document. You can specify a document number here, or you can leave it empty and it'll auto number it for you. All right, I'm going to call this instructions. And then we also have this checkbox, lock document on approval. So what that does is if this is checked and the request is approved, it will make the document record locked, which means that users other than the user that locked it cannot update it unless they have the permissions to break a lock. We'll leave that unchecked for now. And so the status is going to default to unfinished, and we'll hit save record. If we go over to our system code screen, they actually added a new status entity specifically for document requests, and that is called DRST. And so this is the new entity for document requests. Okay, so if I go back to my request, the request has been saved, but it's still unfinished. So this document has not been uploaded yet. Once I update it to approved and then save it, oh, I forgot to update the document. Okay, so I'm going to hit upload document over here. So I'm going to hit browse. And so now if I update it to approved, the document still has not been created yet, but once I approve it, the document does get uploaded. And so now it actually creates the document number for me. There's now an existing document record. And so I'm going to view the document, and it's a picture of a bearing. So I'm going to hit close. So now I'm going to fill out a document request to update that document. And so I leave my organization the same because the organization is that of the document that I just created. So if I created it under a different organization, then for the update request, I would need to make sure the organization matched the document that I previously created. So now I'm going to select update existing, and I need to specify the document that I'm updating. I can update the title if I would like to, or I can actually upload a new document, which will replace that previous one. So I'm going to hit upload document, and this time I'm going to use a photo of a gear instead of the bearing. Now, if I hit submit, it'll show me the new file path of the document that I've uploaded. So now if I approve this request, and now if I go back to my document record, so the document number is still the same, and it still has the same description and title because I did not change those. But if I hit view document, now it shows the photo of the gear, which is what I replaced the original bearing photo with. And then, so workflow approval also has an entity for this. So you can link this up with workflow approval just to see who's approving it, to specify who has the authorization to approve it, things like that. So the next piece of document functionality enhancement that they've added are document authorizations. Document repository requests, those are like a security measure to control who is creating or updating documents. Document authorization comes in, it's really controlling who has the ability to view documents as well as create and delete them based on a specific document class. So the next piece of functionality we're going to show is document authorizations, which is a new tab that they've added on the user group. I'm going to go to an example asset that I have set up. Okay, if I open the documents tab, right now I have two documents associated with the asset. I have document 1, which does not have a class on the document record, and I have document 2, which does have a class associated with the document. Okay, so document authorizations works by first configuring a new install parameter that they've added for docu-auth. Basically, this install parameter determines if document authorization is enabled or not. So when you enable document authorization, it's based on document classes. And so if you turn this on and documents have a class, users without authorization for that class will no longer be able to see that document. So that's important to note before you turn this on. So I'm going to go to my user group record and go to my document authorizations tab. I already have the record. I'm going to delete it so I can start from scratch. So I have no authorizations now for my user group, and I'm going to update document auth to yes. So this is going to enable document authorization. So now if I go back to my asset, before we had two documents, one with no class, one with a class. If I refresh the screen, change the tab and go back, I lost access to document 2 because document 2 had a class, and I turn on authorization. Because my user group does not have authorization for that class, I can no longer see it. So this is an important call out because if I didn't have access to the documents screen, I would have no way of knowing that that document existed or was associated with this asset. So that's just something important to keep in mind. Now I'm going to go back to my user group record, and I'm going to create an authorization for the document class on that asset. So authorization is based on classes, and you cannot do it for individual documents. So I'm going to select a confidential class, and similar to the screen permissions tab, we have insert, update, and delete. There's not a checkbox for querying or viewing because actually creating this record is what allows you to query or view the document, right? So I'm going to leave all of these unchecked, and then I'm going to hit submit. Now, if I go back to my asset and then refresh it, now I can see the document again because I now have access to that class, or I now have the authorization for that document class. Because I do not have insert, update, or delete, I couldn't do any of those. So I could not create a new document in that class. I could not delete a document in that class, or I could not update it. And I would need those permissions to do so for at least for documents with that class. Next, we're going to show some enhancements for digital work. So I'm going to grab my iPad real quick, sharing from my iPad with digital work open. So the first enhancement to show is they've added a new work schedule screen. So I'm going to go to work and work order schedule. And what this does is it shows me all of the work order and activities that I have assigned to my logged in employee for the day selected. And so this is based on the work order schedule labor tab. If I create a record here, scheduling an employee, myself in this case, for work order on a certain day, it'll show up on this new work order schedule screen on digital work. And so you can click these buttons to go through different days. So I'll click plus to go to the next day. And if I click on a work order, it will actually take me to that work order. So it'll take me to that work order list, and then I click it again, and I'm on the work order. So if you're scheduling everything for users on the iPads, they can just use this work order schedule screen to see what they have assigned for the day, and just use this to go through their list and go through their work orders. All right, the next enhancement is they've made the parts tab on the physical inventory screen easier to navigate. So I'm going to go to a physical inventory, and I'll just pull up an existing one. Now, if I go to the parts tab and select a part, they've added these new buttons on the bottom so that you can just quickly scroll through your parts and fill them out without having to save each one and go back to the list and click on a new one. So this will save you a lot of time for physical inventories on digital work. And I can click the left one to go back the next part record. For the next functionality, this is probably the biggest update to digital work. So they've added a new way to set up your menu structures. Right now, I have my default menu in the top left. So we can actually replace this with a tile-based menu. So I'm going to go back to the desktop and pull up the new screen that they've added. So they've added this new digital work home setup screen, which allows you to replace your standard digital work menu with custom tiles. And we'll show some examples of this. So this digital work home code screen, it functions very similar to the inbox setup screen. This allows us to actually create the tiles that we would see on our digital work menu. So first we set up our ID and description, and I'm actually just going to pull up an existing one, my assigned work orders. Just like in inbox, you're going to fill out your SQL statement, and on the queries screen, they've added a new checkbox for these digital work home tiles, and it's called digital work home. So when you're making a query for this, you just check that. Now, if I go back to my digital work home setup screen, so much like the inbox, the query is what's going to control the number, the count that we see on our tile. So just like an inbox as well, we can select a screen to link it to. And the nice thing about this is you're not just limited to your standard screens, but you could also link it to a grid if you'd like. And so you can select a screen and you can select a data spy if you'd like, or you can just leave it empty and it'll go with that screen's default data spy. Then you will fill out your filter just like you would for an inbox, which is just going to be, in most cases, your where clause from the SQL statement. And so the SQL statement is what controls the number that you see. The filter is what actually determines what results you see once you open it. And so we also have this insert mode, which we'll show an example of after this. So I have my digital work home code created. So now I'm going to assign it to my user group. So I'm going to go to my user group screen, and I have my user group pulled up already. And I'm going to open the digital work home tab, which is where I fill out what my menu tiles are going to be. So we would enter in a tile and the sequence that it appears in. So this is a really important thing to note. Once you add a single tile to your user group's digital work home tab, the standard menu will no longer be accessible. So everything I have here, it's not going to show anymore. It's going to be replaced by our tiles. That's easily fixable. If you decide you don't like it, you can always just delete the records on this tab. And once you have no records, it'll go back to your standard menu. But so we're going to submit this and add our first tile, my assigned work orders. So now if I go back to digital work, now I have a new menu. Okay, and so this is the new tile-based menu. So now, instead of like my inboxes and all the menus I have in the tab here, now I just have the tiles that I've added. So right now I've only added this my assigned work orders tile. So that's all I'm seeing. And so here, it gives me the number of how many are in the tile. So in this case, that is the result of our SQL statement. And then if we click on it, we'll see everything in there. So earlier, I had mentioned this insert mode checkbox. So sometimes you might not want to query for data. You might just want to be able to quickly create a new record. So what this insert mode checkbox does is when you click on that tile, it'll automatically open up that screen to create a new record. So for this example, we're doing submit work request, and we have it linked to the work request screen. We don't care how many work requests already exist in the system. All we're trying to do here is quickly open the screen to submit a new work request. So I'm going to copy this and add it to our user group, and I'm going to add this as sequence 20. So this should appear second. All right, so now if I go back into digital work and, okay, so I need to log out and log back in. So now I have the submit work request tile that I just added. So if you'll notice, instead of a number, this one has a plus in the top right. That indicates that it's opening an insert mode. And so if I click on this tile, it's going to pull up the work request screen and automatically open up insert mode. So I'm creating a new record. Okay, so I'm going to close out of this and go back to my start center. So if you'll notice, these have different icons. We did not choose the icons on the actual digital work home tile. The way this works is you can define a screen to have a certain icon. So it's set at the screen level. So everything that is linked to the work order screen is going to have this wrench icon unless we change it to something else, but then they would all have the same thing. And the way you set that is you go to the screen. They've added a new field here, the digital work app icon field. And so that lets you select the icon that is going to be displayed for all tiles that are linked to that screen. If we ever wanted to remove these tiles and get our old menu back, all we'd have to do is delete these. And now if I log back out on digital work and log back in, now because I've deleted the tiles, I have access to the old menu back. All right, so that's it for digital work. We have a few more enhancements, more minor things. First of all, they've added a good amount of new entities for approval workflow. So all of these entities have been added for approval workflows. And what's important to notice is the equipment record now has 2 fields you can do approval workflows on. So the regular status and the operational equipment status. And so using the 2 of those, you could create a very complex approval workflow if you needed. Next, some additional enhancements. Hover text timeout has been removed. So before, if you were to hover over something, it'll show you the description. Before, that description would disappear after 5 seconds. Now it'll stay there as long as you hover your mouse over. Bulletins will now only display after their start date has been reached. The closing code description fields, before, if you changed a closing code description, it would not update on the work order. Now it will. They fixed an error where before, if you try to create a revision for a PM and the PM had an out of service class, it would give you an error. Now you can still create revisions for PMs even if their class has been out of service. The EPAC toolbar icon has been renamed to documentation. So this one, and that'll take you to Hexagon's standard documentation site. They've added a lockout tagout mode for EAM offline. They've also added a new report called Advanced Report Schedule History. And this report allows you to see any like the details on cognitive scheduled reports. So like when they send out and who they're going to. And then lastly, they've added screen designer support in digital work for user-defined screens. And then lastly, just some updates to install parameters and organization options. So the first one, this help to URL, this allows you to replace where this documentation button goes. So by default, it'll go to Hexagon's documentation site, but you could replace this with a different link if you had a custom site hosting training or documentation. Scale fit, this is a new install parameter, which determines if image documents will automatically scale to the size of the browser window. We have this docu-auth that enables the document authorization that we'd already talked about. AI chat OP that enables the Alix chatbot for the environment. And this is how you will access Alix, by the way, if it's enabled. You just click this AI button and it'll open up Alix for you. And some organization options they've added. PO work order close. This one allows you to update purchase orders even when work orders associated with lines on that purchase order have been closed. Before, you would get an error if you tried to do this. This over receive, this allows you to receive additional amounts for both parts and services after the original PO order quantity has been met. And then this is the checklist autosave one that we talked about. So this only affects checklist items that do have a dynamic follow-up associated with them. All right, so that's all the changes we wanted to discuss for 12.2. Just wanted to say thank you all for attending and give a call out to Becca. Did you want to speak on Streamline?
Yeah, sure. I'm just encouraging folks to go check out. I know they continue to update the agenda for Streamline 2025. And right now there's a discount code, the early bird 30 for 30% off. So we just put the links in the meeting chat. So definitely check it out, see the agenda, take a look at all the great breakout sessions and workshops that's being planned for February. And then I also included a link to subscribe to the DTI Academy email list that will ensure that you're kept up to date of workshops that we're planning for Q1 of 2025. So just want to make sure everybody has access to all the information and everything that's going on. So I think that's it. Bailey, you have anything else? That was very informative.
Thank you, Rebecca, for your
Yeah, of
contribution.
course.
And I want to thank everyone for joining today.
All right. Take care, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.